Greetings, everyone. It is GleeCon, and I am coming back at you one more time with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we finished off the Silver Pine Forest. We finally finished that, and we'll be sending old Farinell, our Forsaken Warlock, into the Hillsbrad foothills next. We just did a couple quests. One was easy kill. I want to say it was maybe some undead in a cave. And then we teamed up with a random person, a mage, and the two of us fought our way with repeated deaths to the top of the Knoll Castle and defeated Thule Ravenclaw. It was fun, it was challenging, but it wasn't overly frustrating, but it did, just those two things alone took a good amount of time. We've also been reading the Alliance Player's Guide, and in chapter 7 so far, it's a big lore heavy chapter, and we got a rundown of the history of Alliance, and this time in an episode that's probably going to be just about as long. We're going to start the section called the State of the Alliance. It's really the rest of the chapter, but it's broken down into some sections. So we're going to focus on Alliance leadership and hierarchy. So stay a while and listen as we look at the various leaders of the Alliance and the hierarchy thereof. If you want to know what's going on in the Alliance right now, or at least at the time I'm writing this is the place to look. We've got our fair share of leaders in the Alliance. Some of them are good, some of them not as much so. These leaders all have different ideas of how things should be run, and I'm not one to tell them how to do their jobs, but I'm glad to tell you which of them have their heads screwed on straight. Of course, there's more to the Alliance's structure than just what their figureheads, leaders, have to say about it, and I'll get to that too. Keep your pants on. I can already envision a few of my students in the guild nodding off, and I'm hardly through the first paragraph. I better get to the good stuff. As unlikely as it sounds, humans aren't the only ones in charge as much as they used to be. Yeah, they've got their spanky new cities on both continents, but there's one problem. The eastern side of things has no distinct leader. Stormwind's kid prince is a good lad and all, but Anduin is 12? If he were dwarf, he'd hardly be walking at that age. Actually, come to think of it, I've never seen him outside the palace anyway. But enough about the poor lad. He's had enough grief from others. Anduin tries to do what's best for his people, but he's just a child, and he's clearly not pulling the strings. Who is then, you ask? Well, I'll tell you, and you aren't going to like the answer. On the human side of things, Lady Katrina Prester and Lord Bolvar Forddragon serve as the king's main advisors, and they pretty much call the shots. Bolvar is a good man and a damn good fighter. Problem is, he's not one to insult the judgment of an educated lady like Katrina Prester. That's a problem because it seems like her advice is pretty much the exact opposite of anything a logical person with half a brain would come up with. Don't get me wrong, Katrina has some good qualities. She's pretty enough for a human lass. That qualifies her to serve me an Aeol, but not to give orders to an army of thousands of soldiers, and that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, so, there's a lot that goes on here. We know that that's really, I believe, Onyxia. Much like Deathwing did, she's manipulating the humans. We know that Bolvar Forddragon is eventually the person who becomes the Lich King after Arthas is destroyed. We also know, this is them advising, that his dad, Anduin's dad, does make an appearance, a reappearance, and leads the Alliance for one or two expansions before, again, being lost. Speaking of, let's actually look at Lord Bolvar Forddragon. Lord Bolvar is as stalwart and loyal of a soldier as they come, perhaps to a fault. While he does his best to look after Stormwind's interests, he seems to fall under the charm of the alluring Lady Katrina Prester, much like many others in the kingdom. By deferring to her judgment, he has allowed for some crucial gaps in the defenses of human-controlled territory. And that's probably what's happening in Classic, why when we just did this message for the Red Ridge Mountains, where we ran to Westfall and Stormwind itself and Duskwood, and we're learning that the Stormwind is pulling back its troops from those lands. That's probably why. It's probably her advice doing that. So that's cool. That's we can kind of connect some dots on that right here. By deferring to her judgment, he is one of the few who is aware that the true King of Stormwind, Varian Wrynn, is probably alive and missing. This is one of the justifications for keeping most of Stormwind's army centralized. Katrina has convinced Bolvar that the boy King Anduin will be the next target of whoever captured or killed the real king on his diplomatic mission. It is suspected that Varian was captured because his trip to Theramore signified an effort to make peace with the Horde, and a number of forces wished the fighting between the Alliance and the Horde to continue, maybe captured by Onyxia herself. Here's a handwritten note from the author on King Magni Bronzebeard's copy of this book. Brother, she's sabotaging that. I'm sure of it. This isn't just one of my little hunches. We need to get someone in there to watch her, maybe even take her out. Hell, I've half a mind to do it myself. We need to get someone we trust in Stormwind's throne room immediately to keep an eye on things. Now, I'm not saying the humans are completely inept. Bolvar leads his troops well, and he's a great boon to us when he's out in the field. That being said, humans traditionally lead the Alliance, and as a result of Lady Prester's intervention, proper human leadership has become impossible. See, she doesn't seem to think the other races are necessary. She'd get along well enough with the likes of Fandral Staghelm if she were an elf, or if he were a human. I'll get to Fandral later, though. The point is, while Lady Jaina Proudmoore has been uniting the Alliance's races and then some on Kalimdor, the humans are doing a damn fine job of undoing the Alliance in the Eastern Kingdoms. Hell, it gets worse. Katrina won't even allow the king to send reinforcements to human lands that desperately need it, such as Duskwood and the Red Ridge Mountains. There you go. Every report of enemy activity on those fronts is shut down for lack of proof, like our dead men and women aren't good enough for her. There's something deeply wrong with that lass. The end result of this situation is twofold. One, the Alliance is stronger on Kalimdor than in the Eastern Kingdoms, and two, Night Elves are stepping into lead where humans traditionally have in the past. By stronger, I don't just mean in numbers. I mean we're actually working together on Kalimdor, and that's a rare sight in the East. This is leading to some level of resentment on all sides of things. Even the gnomes seem a bit confused on who to listen to. Unfortunately, while the Night Elves are leading the Alliance and keeping it together politically with some notable help from Jaina, they don't seem to have anyone who excels in leading on the battlefield like humans used to. In fact, no one is leading on the field like the humans. Okay, really Lothar and Uther used to. Not for the Alliance, anyway. There's only one person I can think of with the leadership to bring us back swinging, and he was banished from the Alliance. Shows how we treat our best. Talking about Tyrion Fordring here, for those of you who read my report on the Plague Lands and Lands of Conflict, and who read the manga with us. If we actually gave him some inspiration, he might whip the Silver Hand back into action. Then we'd see some undead heads start to roll. Unfortunately, he becomes a Death Knight. The main way the humans are still contributing to the Alliance these days seems to be inactive junior officers who are willing to do things on their own without explicit orders from high up. Many of these officers are still fulfilling the traditional human role of teaching those less experienced with war what to do. As funny as this sounds, humans are having to teach most of the Night Elf men how to fight. Sentinels have been all female since ancient times, and they haven't had a male military force since the War of the Ancients, apparently. Even most of the Druids didn't have all that much combat training. They never needed it. It's significant to note that humans still provide the majority of the Alliance's officers, but many of these officers simply never see the battlefield anymore. Much of the military might of the human nations is sitting at Stormwind right now, and it's a shame. The elves and the rest of us have to pick up the slack. Alright, let's get some flavor text on this. Not wishing to deal with the presence of the Dreadlord any longer than he absolutely had to, Ishi followed Akalon with haste. He ran through the spells in his mind that would put a swift end to the unholy creature when they finished with it. On a certain level, he would have preferred to just slaughter these demons one at a time if necessary, but he knew that such would be impossible. These were not mindless creatures, and the absence of even one would be noticed almost immediately. The mage had to keep himself from cringing as they passed from the blasted lands into the tainted scar itself, and again when the Dreadlord called out to the other demons in the area to announce their presence. "Mortal servants of Kil'jaeden," the Dreadlord called them. Ishi bit his tongue in disgust. While he most certainly did not enjoy the prospect of being in such a place, he was glad that Akalon seemed to be able to control the monster as well as he claimed. One thing was clear, however. The effect was temporary. The mage noticed that while Akalon had claimed to have never before set foot in the tainted scar, he seemed to know the way. While the Dreadlord walked in front of them, Akalon was clearly leading in a certain direction. After several minutes of walking, they approached another ridge. Akalon beckoned Ishi over, and he obliged and approached, interested to see what the warlock wanted to point out. "Over this hill lies the crater created by the landing of an inferno. It is within that crater that the Ambassil Keeper lies, guarded by over a dozen elite Felguard. We will require a distraction in order to retrieve the staff." The warlock smiled to himself, looking extremely pleased. So you plan to send the Dreadlord in to distract them then? Ishi inquired, as curious as he was uncertain. His hand drifted instinctively toward the sword on his belt as he looked at so many demons below. Not exactly, Akalon responded, his voice trailing off. Ishi had only started to turn toward the warlock when something heavy, presumably the Dreadlord's fist, slammed into the side of his skull. His vision went red momentarily, but he managed to begin the words of an incantation before the Dreadlord struck again, knocking him to the ground. He could almost hear a feminine voice softly saying, I told you so, as his vision faded into blackness. Okay. I feel like maybe that's like a ellipses, ... That flavor will continue. Sidebar on Fandral Staghelm. The current Archdruid in Darnassus is Fandral Staghelm, who replaced Malfurion Stormrage after the latter's mysterious disappearance. Staghelm dislikes Tyrande Whisperwind, and their goals are often in opposition. They are fierce political rivals. It's clear to me that Fandral is terribly misguided. He's one of the few Alliance leaders who openly attempts to perpetuate the war with the Horde for his own ends. He is trying to restore his people's power, but he's going about it in the wrong way. Fandral Staghelm's statistics and further information can be found in Lands of Mystery, which we already read. Okay, back to what we were reading about the humans. So as a result of human inactivity, the Night Elves are working all over the place these days. Tyrande calls the shots from Darnassus, much to the chagrin of everyone's favorite Archdruid, Fandral Staghelm. You'll find those loyal to Tyrande organizing alliance activities nearly everywhere on Kalimdor, and in a few places in the Eastern Kingdoms now too. Tyrande has so much authority because she's the head of two of the three major Night Elf factions, the Priestesses of Elune and the Sentinels, the third faction being the Druids. Now, Tyrande doesn't actually do much to lead the Sentinels these days. She leaves that to her close friend Chandra's Feathermoon. That's a picture of the two of them, Chandras and Tyrande. This keeps the two organizations tight-knit, and that's exactly the way it should be. The Druids played well with the other kiddies when Malfurion was in charge, but it seems like Fandral has his own agenda, and he has little desire to incorporate anyone else in it. We can all be thankful that Staghelm rules only the Druids, a small segment of the Night Elf population. Tyrande rules the rest. I wish I saw more Druids picking sides, but Fandral is their rightful leader, and most don't question his authority. The Night Elves contribute a great deal to the Alliance with their knowledge of nature. This assists both in tactics and in teaching people how to better survive in a natural environment. The Night Elves have long known how to live off the land without any permanent shelter, and while a few of us figured this sort of thing out on our own during the last couple wars, they're starting to teach everyone about it. A considerable boon, especially for those people fighting in places like Lordaeron, where you might have to know how to purify the water and survive with very little for days on end. The Priestesses of Elune rival the Church of the Holy Light in treating wounds, both by magical and non-magical means, and they contribute a great deal by teaching basic medicinal skills to many soldiers. Let's have a sidebar on old lady Tyrande Whisperwind. Tyrande Whisperwind is the leader of the Night Elves, a legendary hero by all accounts. She has opposed the forces of darkness for more than 10,000 years, and she doesn't look a day over 20. Tyrande's main concerns right now are twofold: to protect her people and their allies, and to restore her love Malfurion Stormrage from whatever ailment prevents him from returning to his physical body. Though Malfurion's disappearance wounded her emotionally, it has only bolstered her resolve. She does everything within her power to get him back and defend her people at the same time. Though she is the leader of the Sentinels, as well as the High Priestess of Elune, she leaves most military action in recent times to her close friend and confidant, Chandra's Feathermoon. As one of the leaders who agreed to side with the Orcs against the Burning Legion at Mount Hyjal, she is aware that they are not all evil, and has no desire to continue the war against them unless, of course, she finds out they are responsible for what happened to Malfurion. She maintains contact with War Chief Thrall, though not to the extent that Jaina Proudmoore does, and works with him to try to arrange another ceasefire. Tyrande Whisperwind's statistics and background information can be found in Shadows and Light. Again, one that we read a while back. Alright, back to the leader synopsis. I've seen a lot of Night Elves in Eastern Kingdoms as of late, which is good. We can all use the help. We can use all the help we can get. Most of them seem to be unorganized, however, which is bad. Without someone like Tyrande or Chandras to keep them together, the Night Elves are just as desperate for good leadership as the rest of us. Really. I hear there's an Archdruid up in the Alterac Valley with a small group of Druids. Maybe she could help out. The Night Elves send ambassadors to discuss plans with the humans in Stormwind and such, of course, but that simply isn't enough. The Alliance in general isn't functioning as a coherent unit right now, and while the Night Elves seem to be arguably doing their best about trying to make things work, it isn't enough. One of the blocks is their continuing strained relations with the High Elves. Things are improving with that, but it's going to take time. A lot of Night Elves out there want to say I told you so to the High Elves about the Burning Legion coming back, and some High Elves want to wipe the arrogant smirk off said Night Elf's face with a fireball. Of course, these days the point is largely moot since High Elves are few and far between. For the record, I don't think we can blame the High Elves for the Burning Legion's return, but it hardly matters at this point. The High Elves are in dismal shape. A few High Elf lodges still stand up near the hinterlands and such like, but most of them fled to Stormwind or moved west with Jaina to Theramore. Those High Elves who are still around are almost all battle-scarred veterans and survivors. Not many managed to flee from Quel'Tha Lost when the Scourge hit it, but a few fought their way out or survived elsewhere. The biggest blow to the High Elves may not have been the Scourge, however. When Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider, the last of their royal line, decided to declare his followers Blood Elves and leave for Draenor, he took 90% of the remaining High Elves with him. High Elves have varied reactions to this event. Some feel that their prince abandoned them. Others feel he is a fool for continuing to pursue arcane magic after the destruction of the Sunwell. Some respect his decision and simply chose not to follow, but they are rare. The remaining High Elves are sadly too few in number to play a major role in things right now, but I expect as the years pass they will rebuild and prove a great boon to the Alliance. Nope, you're wrong. Enough about the Elves. Into the good stuff. Ironforged dwarves and gnomes play a major role in the Alliance these days, far more so than in the Second or Third War by my estimation. Okay, so we're moved on to the other two races. With High Tinker Mechatork and King Magni Bronzebeard both in Ironforge, both our peoples prosper, though both dwarves and gnomes have suffered terrible losses in the recent wars like everyone else. The advantages of having gnomes and dwarves in the same city are both material and social. On the physical side of things, engineering advances at an amazing rate with dwarves and gnomes working together, and we also get to know each other better so we can coordinate well on the battlefield. A great example of our new technology is the Deep Run Tram, which allows lightning speed travel between Stormwind and Ironforge. This helps strengthen the bond with our human neighbors who are already close in our hearts. In fact, the Dwarf District in Stormwind helps out with the overpopulation problem in Ironforge. The dwarves living in Stormwind live well and have no trouble taking the tram if they miss their underground home, and who wouldn't? Alright, and let's pause and have a sidebar on their leader, King Magni Bronzebeard. The King of Ironforge is depressed. The death of his younger brother, Muradin, left him in a somber state for over 2 years after the Third War concluded. And we know that he's not really dead. In the time since then, he had begun to recover from his stupor, urged on by his remaining brother, the renowned explorer Bran Bronzebeard. Humble bragging about yourself in the third person. Unfortunately, things have taken another turn for the worse in recent days. Princess Moira Bronzebeard has disappeared, and it is feared that she may have been slain. Her bodyguard is also missing, and he was known to be a competent fighter. Some suspect that Dark Iron Dwarves captured her, and this is the reason for Magni's recent invasion plans. While this recent event hurts Magni deeply, he is beginning to turn his thoughts away from sadness and toward revenge, both against the Scourge and the Dark Irons. These events may provide him with a much-needed motivation, but Bran fears that Magni may begin self-destructive or even suicidal attacks in order to appease his conscience. Yes, she was, but she actually likes it there, and she becomes their leader and ambassador. Fortunately, King Magni is still a good-hearted soul, and he has proven one of the strongest diplomats on the side of the Alliance. With a bit more motivation, he could probably be a key figure in sealing a treaty with the Horde or gaining the support of neutral organizations. Perhaps if a group of adventurers can find Moira, he'll have new enthusiasm and begin to support the Alliance as strongly as he did in his youth. Alright, back to the gnomes and dwarves. There's just one small hitch with all this. Dwarves and gnomes are almost as bad about sitting around in Ironforge as the humans are in Stormwind. Now, we do have a good number of settlements from Loch Modan all the way to the wetlands, but these are small towns and garrisons. There's no major military activity on our part. The only real exception is the Stormpike clan. They've taken a liking to the Alterac Mountains and defend them fiercely against the trolls and orcs invading the area. Why the trolls would even want the valleys of Alterac, I have no idea. Still, by taking a few troll heads, the Stormpikes managed to form a close bond with the Wildhammer dwarves, which is a very good thing. The Wildhammers have helped us out since the Second War, but they don't consider themselves part of the Alliance. They seceded before the Third War. Maybe if we treat them nice enough, the Wildhammers will again join us officially. That'd be damn nice. Our esteemed King Magni Bronzebeard, rightful ruler of Ironforge, has had a long career of leading our people to military victory. As one of the heroes of the Second War, many look up to him as a potential savior in these dark times, but alas, our king has found little time to lead our people into battle as he used to. We all understand that the king's duties are extensive and not limited to military campaigns, but these days the dwarves have no clear battlefield leader. Many choose to serve under General Marcus Jonathan, one of the human ground force commanders, But Marcus is one of many leaders who has been forced to remain in Stormwind due to the king's orders. The end result is that essentially no high-ranking dwarf or human officer is on the battlefield actually leading a large group. We have a few field marshals and grand marshals out there, but they are all dealing with small elite groups, and we need more. General morale among the dwarves remains high, but our king has barely been outside the gates of Ironforge in recent months. This is partially because he awaits news on a matter of national and familial importance that I am not at liberty to discuss here, but regardless, we need our king back on the field as soon as possible, or he needs to appoint another worthy military leader. King Magni also seems to be planning for an assault on the Dark Iron dwarves in the Blackrock depths. While we have long had problems with the Dark Iron sabotaging our plans, I cannot see why now would be the time to take action and crush them. As I'm sure our king knows, the Scourge is our most immediate threat, followed by the remnants of the Burning Legion. I'd like to see more of an effort from the Alliance in general to coordinate a massive attack on the Scourge. We lose more good people to the undead each day, and those people are turned into mindless slaves to fight against us. We simply cannot allow this to continue. The gnomes still put a good deal of their effort into finding a way to reclaim Nomergon. Alright, so now we're switching over. Their former home, probably to the last race. Curing the irradiated gnomes who escaped from Nomergon is also a high priority. I've heard rumors that there's still an inhabited clean zone inside Nomergon, and I think we'll get to that in Cataclysm. Plus the dungeon Nomergon. And the people inside can't get out. Evacuating these brave survivors should indeed be high on the priority list, as the gnomes as a whole can't contribute as much to the Alliance as they normally would, with their attention still focused on the Trogs and such. The Wildhammer clan seems to be having similar trouble with trolls. This makes sense since many trolls lived in the same general area as Quel'Thalas and likely were forced to move south into Wildhammer and human territory after the Scourge's invasion. The Wildhammers fortunately do have an active leader, although he's not likely to let you know that when you first meet him. Falstad Wildhammer is a bit of a war hero himself and one of the best Griffin riders I've had the privilege of knowing, but his most important role was probably as a member of the small group of adventurers who freed Alexstrasza, the legendary Dragon Queen, from captivity at the hands of the orcs. I didn't realize he was the leader. I forgot. Maybe we did know that. Now, the Wildhammer dwarves weren't really big on the whole alliance thing in the past. They've always kept to themselves, but with their high elf allies forced out of their homes, the Wildhammers are beginning to see that they would be better off with mutual help. We need to get some savvy diplomats up to Airy Peak to make things official. The Alliance needs strong friends right now, and coordinating with Falstad would make things much safer for both sides. The Wildhammers are already lending us a hand with griffins and trained riders. I suspect the dwarves at Airy Peak could benefit from our technology and such as well, so it's a win-win situation. Good stuff. We should get right on that. On a final note, Barrymore is damn near perfect. We should strive to follow Jaina's example, well, without the whole living in a stinking swamp part. Jaina is perhaps the strongest human leader we've got left, but the poor lass can't handle everything by herself. With Onyxia threatening to huff puff and blow her city down, Jaina has a lot to deal with. Fortunately, she has assistance, a scary night elf girl with a big hammer, and a human archmage. I wonder who those people are. We'll have to check into that when we get to Theramore. Also, they really glossed through the gnomes, so let's take a sidebar and retouch on them by looking at their leader, High Tinker Mechatork. The King of the Gnomes is a bit less silly than the title sounds, but still pretty crazy. Mechatork spends the overwhelming majority of his time working on plans to retake Nomergon, knowing that many of his people are still trapped inside with no means of escape. He also just gets like a kind of a central space, like he hangs out in a courtyard in Ironforge. While he appreciates the hospitality of the dwarves, Ironforge is too small for both races, at least in the long term. In addition to his efforts to retake Nomergon, Mechatork works with the dwarves on a regular basis to perfect new military technology and strategies. He is partially responsible for the new models of dwarven flying machines being sent out into the field, but his people are too few to make much more of a contribution to the Alliance at this time. Mechatork is also assigned a team to researching anti-scourge weaponry, knowing that an undead attack is imminent. Okay, if you notice here, as we switch, it looks like we're switching gears for the end of this part, so we're probably going to get to a stopping point soon. But even the font is changing and getting a little bigger. You may have noticed that I haven't talked about a real Alliance hierarchy here. That's because there isn't one. It's a mess. Sure, we've got ranks, but telling someone you're a Grand Super Marshal of Eliteness isn't going to help one bit if you don't have any soldiers assigned to you. Each race has its own leaders or lack thereof right now, and they haven't worked together to assemble an extensive leadership system yet. I think it's about time we get started because it's frankly annoying that the races don't have any need to acknowledge each other's authority right now. And besides, I figure I'd be pretty damn high on the rank list. To give you an example, I recently found out about the existence of Grand Admiral Jess Tereth. That sounds familiar. Apparently, Dalen Proudmoore has a replacement now. I hadn't been informed. This Jess Tereth is in Stormwind to discuss plans. Seems like everyone is discussing things in Stormwind. She's an admiral. She should be out at sea doing stuff. Am I wrong? Okay. We'll read these sidebars real quick. First of all, we have a sidebar on Falstad Wildhammer. The Wildhammer dwarves are stuck between a rock and, well, trolls. Lots and lots of trolls. They wish to maintain their independence, something that their people have valued since the War of the Three Hammers, but the increasing number of trolls in their land causes growing concern. Falstad also sees the Scourge just beyond the horizon and knows that one day his people will have to make a stand against the living dead as well. To this end, he seeks to increase the Wildhammer's ties with the Alliance without actually joining, which puts him in an interesting position. Since he has not officially joined the Alliance, he lacks their full support, but the Horde does not yet consider him an enemy either. He has yet to decide if joining the Alliance would be beneficial enough to risk the wrath of the Horde, but his people lean more in that direction, especially with many of them working side by side with the Stormpike clan and the few remaining High Elves already. Falstad does have one more ace up his sleeve, the Red Dragonflight. As a member of the party that freed the Dragon Queen and a personal friend of her mate Coriel Strauss, he is one of the most respected humanoids in the eyes of the Red Dragons. While he has yet to call upon their favor, Falstad considers flying to Grimbatal to ask for aid or just to discuss matters with the dragons. If Falstad could be persuaded to join the Alliance, perhaps he could bring the Red Dragonflight with him. Due to his fighting prowess against dragons, Falstad is often known as Falstad Dragon Reaver, but his real last name is, like Merlin Bronzebeard, that of his clan, Wildhammer. And finally, we will talk about Jaina before we take a break and put the rest off to the next episode. The Lady of Theramore is one of the most respected leaders in the world, and with good reason. She's one of the strongest diplomats, as well as a powerful mage. She seeks to maintain and strengthen the existing relationships between the Alliance races and also end the hostilities with the Horde, so targets like the Scourge and the Burning Legion can be destroyed once and for all. Also on her agenda is finding King Varian of Stormwind, since he was on his way to visit her when he disappeared. Although she hasn't shown it much, Jaina is deeply hurt by the death of her father, and she blames herself for being incapable of stopping it. Yeah, and you can really see that in the BFA cinematics. Likewise, she feels she should have been able to stop Arthas' descent into madness, and when the time comes, she hopes to put an end to the Lich King and her nightmares with her own power. She has sacrificed nearly everything for her people. Regardless, she proves she has the strength to keep fighting, and she will likely play a major role in the war as it continues to evolve. All right, cool. We got another episode in the Fight Pipe, 5x5. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you next time on Lore of Warcraft.